Bible readers. It is Monday, August 31st. We have read Leviticus 9 to 11 and Matthew chapter 21 and 22. And this time in Leviticus, something happened. I didn't remember that Aaron's two sons were killed in the way that they were, in the way that they died. So I was reading about all the offerings, and I got snapped out of it. I found myself interested. And again, maybe I shouldn't admit that some of these, the details of the offerings being made don't necessarily grip my attention. But let me say a couple words about them. Both of our readings, Leviticus and Matthew, get into worship leaders, what is expected of them, and the challenges that are in their vocation. The glory of God transforms ordinary ritual into divine worship. And so the beginning, chapter 9 of Leviticus is really about what is happening in worship. At its most profound level, worship is communion with God, the experience of God's intense presence, what Leviticus calls the glory of the Lord. But let me continue with this. Sometimes, however, we miss the glory of God in worship because we're looking for something too exalted. We want the sermon to move us to tears, the music to carry us to the heights, the prayers to reveal the secrets of our heart. Occasionally, such profound experiences do happen in worship, but most of the time, God is present to us in smaller, quieter, less dramatic ways. A prayer phrase here, the face of a child over there, the curious way the hymn we least like nonetheless compels our attention. Sometimes these are the vessels God chooses to convey glory. I think that's the experience of many Christians who regularly worship, is maybe they're looking for something, and when we hear people say, it just doesn't feed me, or whatever, however we're trying to explain that worship just isn't hitting us where we want it to. A lot of times it's because we're not open to what God is actually offering. Instead, we're only looking for what we're looking for. Then we get to this strange chapter 10, when Aaron's sons are consumed by fire for we're not sure what. And so in my commentary, it says maybe they used hot coals that didn't come from the altar in the sanctuary courtyard. Others suggest they were offering it at the wrong time, others the wrong place. Some wonder if they were drunk. One thing is certain, the offense is by no means accidental. What is most holy and sacred to the Lord is suddenly trivialized in some unexplained way so as to make what has been set apart for God now common. And that's at the heart of the problem, is when that which is supposed to be holy is secularized or made common or made unholy. And that's obviously no good in the sight of God. And so it really speaks to the priestly responsibility. Those who are privileged enough to constantly be approaching God's presence are also exposed to danger when God is not honored through their ministries. The priests were to be good examples of distinguishing between the holy and the common. If they were not models in this most important area, the whole law of God would be made a mockery. And so this is really that moment of making an example of Aaron's sons and how this is to be taken very seriously. Finally, in the 11th chapter about food laws, I think this is interesting as well. The Levitical food laws are the physical expressions of the call for holiness. These laws are meant to make Israelites sensitive to the need to distinguish between the sacred and the secular in every part of their lives. Holiness could not be practiced merely in the religious realm, but also outside of that. God looks for wholeness, completion, and separateness in every aspect of one's lifestyle. The New Testament teaches that these food laws, as was true of all ceremonial law, are no longer binding on Christians. In Mark 7, Jesus declares all foods clean. Peter learns the same principle as it's spoken of in the book of Acts. And so I think that's important to see the connections there too, that yes, this was a law, again, not to be replaced, but fulfilled. And Jesus even declares all foods clean. So something changes with Jesus. I'll just say a quick word about Matthew, although I could go on for 5 minutes about him too. First of all, these three parables, this is when we read them in worship, and I say, this is the gospel of our Lord, and it sometimes doesn't feel like good news. What I want you to know about these is they're not really intended for all people for all time. Um, Matthew writes these parables specifically directed at religious leaders. Just like in Leviticus, we see that priests have high expectations placed on their holiness and their ability to separate what is holy from what is secular. Jesus is basically pointing out that the chief priests are not doing that. They're not doing their job of separating what is holy and what is not. And so he is speaking, Matthew's stories have parables where Jesus is speaking directly to the chief priests. They haven't accepted John the Baptist. They haven't repented. The target is not the whole Jewish people or even us. It's the leaders. So I think that's an important part to remember. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.